Andrea Yates appeared to live a normal life. She was a loving wife and a dedicated mother. Her Houston, Texas home was her domain. She homeschooled her children and tended to their needs. Outwardly, she was the picture of domesticity. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed. Andrea battled with mental illness, a battle hidden from most. Her story is a tragic reminder of the devastating consequences of untreated mental illness. It highlights the urgent need for increased awareness, support, and reform in our approach to mental health. Andrea's story did not begin with tragedy. She was a bright student, a skilled swimmer, and a high school graduate. She pursued a career in nursing, a testament to her caring nature. She met Russell Yates, and they built a life together, seemingly filled with love and promise. Their family grew quickly, but with each child, the pressure mounted. Andrea's mental health deteriorated, but her cries for help went largely unanswered. The world saw a seemingly normal family living an idyllic life. They saw a dedicated mother who homeschooled her children. They saw a loving wife who supported her husband. But they did not see the silent suffering, the internal struggle that Andrea endured. Her story is a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving. It compels us to look beyond the surface and acknowledge the invisible struggles that many face. Andrea's struggles with mental health began long before the tragic events that unfolded. Her family life, while seemingly stable, held underlying tensions. Her dedication to her family, while admirable, masked a growing sense of being overwhelmed. The pressure of motherhood, compounded by her deteriorating mental state, created a perfect storm. Early signs of Andrea's struggles emerged, but they were often dismissed or misinterpreted. Her family, while loving, struggled to understand the complexities of mental illness. They attributed her behavior to stress, exhaustion, or even personal failings. The stigma surrounding mental health prevented them from fully grasping the severity of her condition. Andrea's marriage to Rusty, while filled with love, also carried its own set of challenges. Rusty, a devout Christian, believed in the power of prayer and faith to heal. While his intentions were good, this belief system sometimes clashed with the need for professional medical intervention. The couple's differing views on mental health created a rift, hindering their ability to effectively address Andrea's deteriorating condition. The combination of Andrea's genetic predisposition to mental illness, the pressures of motherhood, and the lack of adequate support created a dangerous cocktail. Her story highlights the complex interplay of factors that can contribute to mental health crises. It underscores the need for a multifaceted approach to treatment, one that addresses not only the individual's needs, but also the family dynamics and societal perceptions that can exacerbate their condition. As the years passed, Andrea's mental health deteriorated. Her symptoms, initially subtle, became more pronounced. She experienced bouts of depression, anxiety, and delusions. She struggled to cope with the demands of motherhood, often feeling overwhelmed and inadequate. Her cries for help, though frequent, were often met with inadequate responses. Andrea sought help from medical professionals, but her treatment was often fragmented and inconsistent. She was prescribed medication, but the dosages were not always appropriate, and the side effects were sometimes debilitating. She was hospitalized on several occasions, but her stays were often too short to address the root causes of her illness. The revolving door of the mental health care system failed to provide her with the long-term, comprehensive care she desperately needed. Her family, while concerned, struggled to keep up with her fluctuating condition. They were thrust into the role of caregivers, ill-equipped to handle the complexities of severe mental illness. They loved Andrea dearly, but they were exhausted by the constant worry, the fear, and the uncertainty that came with her illness. They felt helpless, lost in a system that seemed designed to fail them. Andrea's story is a tragic indictment of a mental health care system that often fails those who need it most. It highlights the lack of resources, the shortage of qualified professionals, and the fragmentation of care that plagues the system. Her case serves as a stark reminder that mental illness is a medical condition that requires compassionate, comprehensive, and sustained treatment. The pressure on Andrea mounted, pushing her to a breaking point. She was a mother of 5, struggling to cope with the demands of her daily life. The weight of her responsibilities, combined with her deteriorating mental health, created a perfect storm of stress and anxiety. Each day, she felt herself slipping further away from the person she once was, consumed by a darkness she couldn't escape. Her delusions intensified, her grip on reality loosened. Andrea began to experience terrifying hallucinations and paranoid thoughts. She believed that she was being watched, that her every move was being scrutinized. Her mind was a battleground, with rational thoughts being overpowered by irrational fears. She felt isolated, unable to reach out for help, convinced that no one would understand her plight. She became convinced that she was possessed, that her children were not safe. Andrea's fears for her children's safety grew more intense with each passing day. She believed that evil forces were at work, threatening to harm her family. Her maternal instincts, twisted by her illness, drove her to desperate measures. She saw herself as the only one who could protect her children, even if it meant taking drastic actions. Her actions, though unimaginable to most, were driven by a mind consumed by illness. Andrea's mental state deteriorated rapidly, and she became increasingly disconnected from reality. Her thoughts were dominated by a sense of impending doom, and she felt powerless to change her fate. The illness that gripped her mind distorted her perceptions, making her believe that the unthinkable was the only solution. On June 20, 2001, Andrea filled her bathtub and one by one drowned her 5 children. The act was a culmination of her escalating delusions and overwhelming despair. In her mind, she was saving her children from a fate worse than death. The tragedy that unfolded was a stark reminder of the devastating impact of untreated mental illness. The nation reeled in horror. News of the incident spread quickly, and the public was left in shock and disbelief. How could such a tragedy occur? The community mourned the loss of 5 innocent lives, and questions arose about how this could have been prevented. The story dominated headlines, and people struggled to make sense of the senseless. How could a mother commit such an act? The question echoed in the minds of many as they tried to reconcile the image of a loving mother with the horrific actions she had taken. The public's reaction was a mix of anger, confusion, and sorrow. People wanted answers, and they wanted someone to blame. The complexity of Andrea's situation was often overlooked in the rush to assign guilt. The public struggled to comprehend the depths of Andrea's despair, the torment that drove her to such extremes. Her story was a stark illustration of the profound impact of mental illness. It highlighted the need for greater awareness and understanding of the struggles faced by those with mental health issues. Andrea's actions were not those of a cold-blooded killer, but of a woman in the grip of a severe psychological crisis. The media, in its rush to cover the sensational story, often failed to provide the necessary context of mental illness. Headlines focused on the gruesome details of the crime, painting Andrea as a monster. The nuances of her mental health struggles were frequently ignored, and the public's perception was shaped by a narrative that lacked empathy and understanding. The sensationalism of the coverage overshadowed the critical issues at the heart of the tragedy. Andrea became a symbol of evil, a monster rather than a victim of a broken system. The portrayal of Andrea in the media and public discourse was one-dimensional, reducing her to a villain without considering the broader context of her actions. This dehumanization made it easier to condemn her, but it also obscured the systemic failures that contributed to her breakdown. Andrea's story was a tragic example of how society often fails to support those in need. Her trial became a media spectacle. The courtroom was filled with reporters, and every detail of the proceedings was broadcast to a captivated audience. The trial was not just about determining Andrea's guilt, but also about satisfying the public's demand for justice. The sensational nature of the coverage turned the trial into a form of entertainment, detracting from the serious issues at hand. Prosecutors painted her as a cold, calculating killer, while her defense team argued that she was insane at the time of the murders. The legal battle was intense, with both sides presenting compelling arguments. The prosecution focused on the premeditated nature of the crime, while the defense highlighted Andrea's severe mental illness. The jury was faced with the difficult task of navigating these complex issues to reach a verdict. The jury ultimately found her guilty, sentencing her to life in prison. The verdict brought a sense of closure to some, but for others, it raised more questions. Was justice truly served? The sentence reflected the legal system's response to the crime, but it did not address the underlying issues that led to the tragedy. Andrea's imprisonment was seen by some as a necessary consequence, while others viewed it as a failure to address the root causes of her actions. The verdict, while legally sound, failed to acknowledge the systemic failures that contributed to the tragedy. Andrea's case highlighted significant gaps in the mental health care system, including the lack of access to treatment and support for those in crisis. The legal outcome did not address these broader issues, leaving many to question what could be done to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Andrea's story is not just about one woman's descent into madness, it is a reflection of a society that often overlooks the needs of its most vulnerable members. Her journey into darkness was marked by missed opportunities for intervention and support. The narrative of her life is a testament to the importance of early detection and treatment of mental health issues. It is a story about the failure of a system that is supposed to protect the most vulnerable. Andrea's case underscores the need for comprehensive mental health care and the importance of providing resources to those in need. The system's inability to support her adequately contributed to the tragic outcome, highlighting the urgent need for reform. It is a story about the stigma surrounding mental illness that prevents people from seeking help and receiving the treatment they need. The fear of judgment and discrimination often keeps individuals from reaching out for support. Andrea's experience illustrates the devastating consequences of this stigma and the critical need for a more compassionate and understanding approach to mental health. It is a story that demands our attention, our compassion, and our commitment to change. Andrea's tragedy serves as a call to action for society to address the systemic issues that contribute to such outcomes. By fostering a culture of empathy and support, we can work towards preventing similar tragedies in the future. It is a reminder that we must prioritize mental health and ensure that those in need receive the care and support they deserve.